Thanks a lot, Dr. Lajja. You set up the ground for my talk, and you brought out some points very nicely. So I'm going to be discussing how to and what to do and what not to do in post-refractive surgery eyes. And these eyes are special. These eyes are very unique because there's a lot of problems since the corneal profile has been changed. The corneal shape has been changed. There is changes in the aberrations. There is changes in the curvature, leading to changes in the asphericity. All this mounts down to finally calculating the right IOL power. And if you have a wrong IOL power, you're going to land up with unhappy patients. But most importantly, sometimes these patients will land up with other problems, like optical phenomenon of glare and halos and dry eyes, just because their corneas are not in the perfect shape, particularly with older generation LASIKs. So just to give you a brief on what a normal cornea is like, a normal cornea, a pristine cornea has positive spherical aberrations, which essentially means that when rays of light fall onto the macula, the central rays of light, as you see over here, tend to bend a little less than the peripheral rays of light. So notice the angle for periphery is a little more and the central is a little less. And this is a classical positive spherical aberration, which is a natural mechanism. So when you do a myopic LASIK, you tend to flatten the cornea. So when you flatten the cornea, your central becomes flatter compared to the periphery, causing an increase in positive spherical aberrations in a normal scenario. So again, if you look at a simple ray diagram, if you notice the peripheral rays of light that now focus tend to deviate more as compared to more central rays or more rays in the visual axis. And this causes increase in positive spherical aberrations, thereby increasing the glare. Now, if these patients are to come to you for a cataract surgery, I think the most intelligent thing one could do in the simplest of ways is to put an IOL which negates it inside the eye, or a negative asphericity IOL. But different companies have different options that are available. Like Alcon comes with a minus 0.15 asphericity, and AMO, I think Johnson & Johnson is a minus 0.3. So I think in this case, an IOL sometimes with more asphericity, more negative asphericity, will try and compensate for the corneal problem, which has been done by LASIK. Hyperopic LASIK is the exact opposite of myopic LASIK. So now you're ablating the mid-periphery. So you're bumping up the central cornea, making it steeper, and you're landing up with negative spherical aberrations, which essentially simply means that your central rays of light are now going to bend more than peripheral rays of light. So your angle for the center is going to be more than the angle for the periphery, and thereby it's the exact opposite of myopic LASIK. So you need an opposite lens. You need a negative aspheric lens, which is difficult, or a zero spherical aberration lens, which I think some companies, although I'm not sure if Bausch & Lomb still has zero spherical lens, but Bausch & Lomb at some point in time had a zero spherical aberration lens, or an aberration neutral lens, which would be the right choice of lens in this eye. The other big problem is actually measuring the true corneal curvature. Like Dr. Lajja said, it's very difficult because most topographies, our Placidos and our manual keratometries measure the anterior cornea. But what's the problem is that when we ablate, we sort of clear up the central cornea. If you notice over here, the central cornea flattens out. So the anterior keratometry readings change, but the posterior keratometry readings still remain the same. If you were to use an older generation Placido, you do not understand this relationship between anterior and posterior, and the Placido and the formulas would assume that the posterior cornea follows the anterior cornea, which is not the case. So measuring a true corneal curvature by using any of the mechanisms of using a Scheimpflug imaging with a Pentacam or a Cirrus, or using OCTs, which are now being increasingly validated and proved, is a good idea to measure the actual K reading, which incorporates the posterior cornea. Needless to say, optical biometry gives us far more value because it helps us in finding out the effective lens position, or the ELP, which has been so much talked about. Well, what is this ELP? Suppose you have a hyperopic eye or a smaller cornea, your actual lens position will be somewhere here. When you do a myopic LASIK, if you don't use the right biometry, you are going to underestimate or overestimate the actual anterior corneal depth, thereby leading to a wrong calculation. So a good biometry is very important. When you have that data, you should use that data wisely. So what I would suggest, and what we normally would do, all of us would use an ASCRS online calculator, which so generously has been given to all of us for free. And it incorporates a lot of higher generation formulas. This is how it looks. There's options for myopia, hyperopia, and prior RK done. And once you choose that, you fill up all the data, and the machine tells you what IOL selection is to be done based on what formula, which is visible over here. It also gives you 3 ranges. It gives you average, minimum, and maximum. The Barrett-Truquet formula is also available on the APS-CRS website. Thanks to Dr. Graham Barrett. It's available for free for all of us to access. And once you put all the readings that you pick up from your topographies, the machine will give you a calculation. When you compared in our clinical setting, in our hospital, and I think the group published it in 2020, We compared the IOL calculation methods, these formulas, after LASIK and RK in patients where we had no prior refractive data. The patients walked into our clinic and were operated many years ago elsewhere. So the aim for this study was to compare IOL prediction error and refractive prediction error when we use the four most commonly used formulas, which are available on the ASCRS calculator for free. And this is what we found. We found that the least prediction error in terms of the IOL prediction error was with the Bairet-Truge formula and the Shammas' formula. And this was statistically significant. We also found that the refractive prediction was also significantly better with the Bairet-Truge and the Shammas formula for LASIK patients. So we concluded that all formulas, though perform very well for LASIK eyes, Bairet-Truge and Shammas are the go-to formulas. When we looked at prior RK, because a lot of RK flows in for cataract now, so considering a lot of RK was done a couple of decades back, we found out that the most important formulas were Atlas 1 and Bairet-Truge, both for IOL prediction and for refractive prediction. And we concluded that most of the eyes were within plus minus 1 diopter, which is a pretty good outcome for a eye with prior RK done. So we concluded, although all formulas do well with RK, the Bairet-Truge and the Atlas formulas do much more better than the other eyes. But the most important recommendation that we also got out of this study was that when you look at all these values from ASCRS calculator of average, maximum, and minimum, choose the minimum IOL power for LASIK and choose the average IOL power for RK to hit the bang on target. And that would give you a good outcome. Needless to say, one needs to be very, very careful of looking at corneal irregularity and spherical aberrations. And one also needs to look at the patient's mesopic pupil size. So I always encourage you to do investigations in a dim lighting condition, because in these eyes, as the pupil goes dimmer and darker and the pupil opens up, their visual quality is significantly deteriorated for no fault of the cataract surgery that's going to happen. But the RK or the refractive surgery couldn't contribute to it. I would counsel all these patients about refractive residual errors, despite the best biometries and calculations, and most definitely in most patients, barring aside a few, I would avoid multifocal IOL and obviously counsel them for visual problems. So just one case scenario, just like Dr. Lajja showed, a 55-year-old lady who had LASIK operated not very long ago, came to us with the decreased vision. So not a long ago LASIK means a good LASIK because it's a spheric profile. Her keratometries are within a respectable limit and she has a diopter and a half of astigmatism. But the best part is that she's a regular astigmatism in the pupillary area, which is the area of interest, because every else other cornea doesn't matter because the light's not going through that cornea, but the visual axis. The aberration profile was very good. Like I said, a recently done LASIK will have an aspheric profile, so the cornea was in a quite good shape. When we calculated the IOL power using the IOL formulas available here, and we tended to go with the Bairet-Truge, which is our go-to formula in any case for most of the surgeries. And we implanted a toric IOL in this patient. And needless to say, because everything fell into place, this was a good patient outcome, and we had an uncorrected distance visual acuity of 6/9, which generally would happen if you use the right formula as well. So the take-home message from this case was that you can do a toric IOL, but please be aware that your visual axis or your pupillary area is regular in nature. What's happening in the periphery shouldn't really matter from the optical point of view. But please do counsel these patients that despite it all, you can have a refractive surprise. Be very aware and teach your staff to look at the raw data. So if you have a bad topography, you're going to have bad K readings, and bad K readings will translate to a lot of bad generally for the patient. So this is the same patient preoperatively when we were doing a biometry, and this were the Mayas, and our optometrists are trained to pick up these red flags. Once we put a topical lubricating eye drop, we tend to wait for 10 minutes for the tear film to stabilize, because you can have erroneous readings immediately after a lubricant. So we waited. And then after 10 minutes, we repeated the biometry and the topography. And notice now we are getting very good K readings over here. And the aberration profile of the patient that was there before with the dry eye versus a patient post for 10 minutes of stabilization with the lubricant is significantly low, which essentially means your tear film was the culprit here. But the biggest problem was that your keratometry is changed. And if your keratometry is changed, what's going to happen is your biometry is going to change, and your IOL power calculation formulas are going to change, and you're going to land up with a refractive surprise, which was for no fault of the LASIK, but a fault of the dry eye. So in such patients where you have extensive dry eyes, I would strongly recommend some sort of tear substitution. If you see them and stabilize their tear film before you do a pre-op, and then you counsel them. Like I said, just to end my slides, to show you the same patient, this is the biometry done with the dry cornea, and this is the biometry done post 10 minutes of stabilization. And notice how we jumped a diopter. So if you pay attention to these small nuances and you pay attention to these small things, use the right biometry, use the right formula, and watch out for red flags. Most likely than not, you will achieve a very good outcome in these patients. Thank you.